Unit 6 A Study of the Nonne Preestes. I. Structure. Objectives. Introduction to the unit. Introduction to the Nonne Preestes tale. NPT. Note on the narrative art. Stories and storytellers in the tale. The priest, the poet, and other characters in the tale. The ironic structure, sympathy and detachment. The complex formal design, sermon, fable, mock, heroic, comic, ironic. Summing up. 6.2 Objectives. The objective of this unit is to help you study the text in a critical manner. After reading this unit, you will be able to A. Comprehend and translate the language of the text. B. Appreciate its poetic qualities. C. Evaluate the Nonne Preestes tale. D. Know Chaucer as the great narrative poet. 6.1 Introduction 1. In this unit we have discussed various aspects of NPT. It is a tale among the tales of the Canterbury Tale. We have shown how it is related to the context. The other tales in city form that context. We have briefly mentioned the framework of the whole poem. It consists of A. The general prologue, B. The talk on the road, and C. The tales. 2 Italian parallels, possible sources, have been mentioned. The distinctive quality of the narrative act of the Chaucer has been brought out. It has been shown the story is characteristic of the storyteller. The irony and drama of the story have been brought out. Plus, the complex formal design of the tale, we suggest, should be analyzed into the following main elements. A. Sermon. B. Reflection. C. Mock heroic. D. Comedy. A. The dream. The dream stories and the debate on dreams. F. The themes. G. The tale. Each one of these elements has been briefly discussed. 6.2 Introduction to the Nonne Preestes tale. In other units on Chaucer you have learned about his age, his poetico tilde, the Canterbury Tales and the general prologue. You know that Chaucer is regarded as a great storyteller in English verse. You are now going to study one of the Canterbury Tales, which is one of the best short stories in English verse. In the general prologue, lines 785 to 800, the poet makes the host devise the narrative plan. This is a dramatic manner of stating the plan, and the fact that the plan turns out to be too ambitious sheds ironic light on it. The host's plan is not the poet's. According to the plan, the Canterbury Tales should have had 124 stories, but it has only 20 complete and 4 IL complete ones. Chaucer has thus left the poem incomplete. Moreover, the sequence and grouping of the tales is determined variously in the Ellesmere and other manuscripts. The poet had left that undecided. But the poem is an aesthetic whole. The 3 main structural units of the Canterbury Tales (CT) are 1. The general prologue, 2. The tales, and 3. The talk on the road, linking them and providing a lively transition from one tale to another. You studied the general prologue in detail. It is important to appreciate the value of the other 2 structural units, the tales and the talk on the road. NPT is not an isolated tale. It belongs to a series of tales. It is, therefore, useful to have an idea of the general perspective of the Canterbury Tales. An idea of the other tales in outline will make you see the place of NPT in the whole scheme better. The knight, appropriately granted the privilege of telling the first tale, tells a romantic story in the heroic manner. His tale of the contest of Palamon in Arcite for the love of Emily is full of philosophical reflections. An example is the following lines from a speech of Theseus. The first mover of the cause above when he first made the fair chain of love, great was the fact, and high was his onton, well wist he why and what thereof he meant, for with that fair chain of love he bound the fire, the air, the water, and the land in certain bounds that they may not flee. After the knight's tale, we have the miller's tale of an Oxford carpenter persuaded by his wife and a clerk to sit all night in a tub to be ready to row away when Noah's flood came again. The contrast between the romantic and the realistic, the serious and the comic, is illustrated in the different styles of these first 2 tales. The third tale, The Reeves, answers a miller's ridicule of the old carpenter by a story ridiculing a miller. Then follows the cook's unfinished tale. Next we have the prose tale of Melibea told by the poet himself. This is followed by the man of law's tale. Then we have the shipman, a tale in which a merchant is deceived by his wife and a monk. The next tale, The Preestes, is of the little chorister murdered by Zeus for his devotion to the Blessed Virgin and of the miracle the Virgin wrought for him. This is followed by Chaucer's tale of Sesostris, written as a parody of the old romances of chivalry. Then we have the monk's tale of the fall of Princes. Tells medieval poet Chanusa. Our text NPT comes after this tale. The doctor of physics tale of Opinias and Virginia follows it. The next tale, The Parnassus, is of the 3 rioters who went in quest of death and found him in their greed for gold. Next, the wife of Bath's tale of the condemned knight saved by an old woman who taught him the answer to a riddle. She had made him promise beforehand to marry her, and on his marrying her became a beautiful girl. Then we have the friar's tale of a summoner who was seized by the devil. The summoner retaliates in his tale, which follows. Then the clerk's tale, which is an old rendering by the poet of Petrarch's Latin story of the patient's ogress Hild. The merchant's tale, which follows, answers the clerk with a story of how a young wife deceived her old husband. The squire's tale of Cambuskin, his fair daughter Canacee, and the RNAGIC SWAT minor entering is followed by the Franklin's tale of the 3-to-1 th of Dorothy and the generosity of a squire and astrologer. Then comes the second nun's tale of Saint Cecilia. Next we have the canon Siemens's tale of how another canon cheated a priest by pretending to transmute silver into gold. This is followed by the manciple's tale of how Apollo punished a crow for revealing a woman's untruth. The last tale by the parson is a prose sermon on the 7 deadly sins and true penitence. Neither an epic nor a single narrative, CT is a unique medley. The tales exemplify 2 central themes: the familiar human instincts of sex and acquisitiveness, 2 of the 7 deadly sins, A. Lechery and avarice. GL. Kittredge 1-9-1-1-1-2 regarded City as a kind of human comedy in which the pilgrims are the dramatic personae, and their stories are only speeches that are somewhat longer than common, entertaining in for themselves, to be sure, but primarily significant in each case because they illustrate the speaker's character and opinions, or show the relations of the travellers to one another in the progressive action of the pilgrimage. He spoke of the marriage act of the human comedy, in which the wife of Bath is at or near the centre of the stage. The famous line spoken by the wife is not unrelated to the cock's infatuation with the hen in NPT. She exclaimed in the prologue to her tale, "Alice, Alice, that ever love was singing." The cock adapted a line from the Latin Bible, "Woman is man's joy and all his bliss." The talk on the road, the third structural component, links the tales together. The host, who is personally conducting the tour, dominates the talk. He is tactful, alert and humorous. When he has an exchange of angry abuse with the partners, the knight intervenes as a peacemaker. Quarrels and disputes in the talk on the road, however, center around the age-old war of the sexes. Strikingly, there are many confessions in the talk: the wife of Baths, the partners, the canon Siemens and the merchants. These confessions give the talks an air of honesty and sincerity, a sure sign of spiritual progress. The poet's sealed action concludes the poem, revealing the spiritual and symbolic aspects of the realistic pilgrimage. Of Thilke Parfait glorious pilgrimage, that high day Jerusalem celestial. It may be suggested that the pilgrimage is a masquerade unmasking the real self of the pilgrims, including the poet. The Decameron by Boccaccio in the Italian language has been held by Chaucer scholars to be a close parallel to the Canterbury Tales in many respects. The general topics of its tales are very similar to those of the Chaucer. 4 of Boccaccio's tales are analogues to 4 of the Chaucer's, and in Boccaccio's apology for the impropriety of some of his stories he makes the same defenses that offered by Chaucer for the same fault, cgp line 725-46. But the unity, balance, exactness and symmetry of Boccaccio's plan contrasts with the diversity and lack of plan in CT. In the Decameron, 100 stories are told in 10 days, 10 on each day, 1 by each member of a group of 10. Another Italian collection of stories, the novel by Giovanni Cercambi of Lucca, an imitation of the Decameron, contains 155 stories. All the tales in this are told by the author himself. The framing story in the novel as a detailed narrative of routine events in contrast with the human comedy of the Chaucer City. Both Boccaccio and Cercambi were contemporaries of the Chaucer, but there is no evidence of the Chaucer having met them in course of his visits to Italy. Check your progress. I.1. Describes the narrative plan of CT. W11O devised it. Refer to the lines in the GP. Critically examine the author's management of the plan. 2. Is CT and finished poem. Mention 2 other famous unfinished poems in English. What are the 3 structural units of CT? How are they related? Do the tales have any unifying theme or themes? Mention 2 striking features of the talk on the road. Attempt a comparison of the following lines: A. Alice, Alice, that ever love was sin. B. Woman is man's joy and all his bliss. Also refer them to their contexts. 6.3 A note on the narrative art. Recent theories of narrative include both history and fiction in narrative as closely related forms of order giving and order finding. Man has been described as a NPTI. The medieval sale tilde author. Poet fiction making on symbol using animal. Language is one of the most useful symbol systems used by man. Fiction is both fabricated and feigned. This make-believe is a fundamental human activity. Role-playing, game-playing, daydreaming and literature are all included within it. With fiction we investigate, perhaps invent the meaning of human life. A story is a way of doing things with words. Words, language are more than its medium. Reordering experience or existence by narrative affirms and reinforces or creates the most basic assumptions of a culture about human existence, about time, destiny, selfhood, heaven, hell, etc. The ideology of a culture is asserted through a story. The story of Rana in Indian culture, for example. Such stories are endlessly repeated. Fictional details have been made to reveal such matters as the difficulty of acquiring self-knowledge or the near-pervasiveness of self-deception or the nature of the struggle against egoistic degradation of love. And in proportion as language is or is not a to experience, it is factual or fictional. Narration, description, dialogue, exposition are the major forms or functions of language. Verse narratives appeared before prose fiction in most literatures. The narrative art of the tale may be analyzed in terms of the Lebovian diamond. The first 120 lines give the orientation, the next 300 lines present the dream and its interpretations by the cock and the hen. The dream of the event and the event are related like idea and reality. The crisis is resolved through a play of int, and the morals drawn are what is termed the John decoder. Narratives, like languages, have their grammas. A story has a setting and an episode system or plot. The events are linked syntagmatically in a plot. Settings and episodes have paradigms. A setting may be states or actions. An event may be a natural occurrence, an inaction, or an internal event. Stories are of various types, e.g. A. Danger of death stories. NPT belongs to this type. B. Detective stories. C. Crime stories. D. Ghost stories. A. Science fiction, etc. These types are paradigms of narrative. 6.4 Stories and storytellers. NPT collocates a number of stories. Some of them are dream stories or stories about dreams told by the cock and the priest. The widow, the protagonist of the other story, which is the setting for the comic fable of the cock, the hen and the fox, is contrasted at once with the cock and the nun by implication. The dream stories are embedded in the fable in the widow's story, the widow's story in the priest's in CT, and CT is Chaucer's story to the primary readers. Both oral and written forms of communication are relevant. You and I are readers reading the tale anew, and I shall help you interpret it critically. It has become a text which forms part of the canon of British poetry, and its readers form an elite community which consists of many groups. Ours is the group of the Indian scholars of English literature. The cock, the priest and the poet are the three storytellers of this tale. The first two are created by the third. Every reader recreates them all in his mind. Fiction and history are mixed up in the process. The literary genre of narrative poetry in medieval Europe and Chaucer's England should be appreciated in the light of an observation of Northrop Frye. People don't think up a set of assumptions or beliefs, they think up a set of stories and derive the assumptions or beliefs from the stories. Check your progress too. 1. Amplify order giving and order finding. 2. How are fiction and symbol related? Is the linguistic symbol fabricated and feigned? What is convention in language and L? I. Literature describes the functions of fiction. How do stories reorder experience or existence? Give examples. How are ideology and mythology related? Does fiction help us know ourselves and others better? Are stories like dreams? Discuss 10 sentences. What is a fable? Analyze the tale in terms of the Lebovian diamond. 6.5 The priest, the poet and other characters in the tale. Like Shakespeare, Chaucer did not invent his stories. The closest possible parallel or source of the story of NPT is found in the Roman Drama, a 13th century French collection of satirical fables. The digression on dreams and the reflective passages are Chaucer's original contribution. The comic, mock heroic and historical aspects of the form of the tale are the gifts of the Chaucer's genius. What makes the tale dramatic is that the author does not say a single word directly. In the prologue to the tale, the bite, the host and the priest talk, and in the main body the priest, the storyteller and the characters of the tale talk. The poet is almost unheard except in phrases like quod the knight and quod ora huster in the prologue to the tale and in the last couplet of the epilogue. The narrator-author identification is, however, apparent in the reflective passages, particularly A. The passage on Necessity Conditionia, lines 471-84, and B. The passage on Geoffrey the Windsor, author of Poetry and Order, a 12th century treatise of rhetoric, lines 581-88. The former is serious, while the latter is ironic and serio-comic. The passage on man-woman relationship, lines 491-500, it has been suggested, has the tacit support of the author. The three human characters, the prioress, the priest and the widow of the tale, are all creatures of imagination and belong to the background of the tale, on which the foreground is occupied by the animal characters. The priest is the narrator detached from the author. Unlike the wife of Bath or the Parnas, he is not portrayed in the general prologue. There, after the portrait of the nun, we have the following couplet. Another non Vidya Hadeshi, that was her chaplain, and Preestes THRE. Skeet commented, Chaucer wrote this couplet in forgetfulness of his general scheme and omitted to reconcile them. It is in this couplet that we have the first mention of the priest as one of three. He is later identified as Sir John by the host in the prologue to NPT. The host requests him to tell a merry tale, and he complies. Line 42 to 54. His physical features are described by the host in the epilogue, line 689 to 93. The host jocularly says that if the priest was secular, he would be a cock used for purposes of breeding. His strong muscles, thick neck and large chest are described. The poet provides some glimpse into his character. His jade is foul and lean, line 467. This suggests his attitude to riches or the rich life of ostentation. He is ironic enough to hint a subtle similarity between his mistress and the cock on the one hand and an implicit contrast of the prioress with the widow on the other. Critics have suggested that the poet presents him as a sly misogynist. The medieval poet, but above all, he is an excellent storyteller. Appropriately a sermon, the story is sleek, mock heroic, and reflects the character of the storyteller, who faintly reflects the author. The priest is, ironically, the confessor and spiritual advisor to the prioress, and at the same time dependent on her for livelihood. His cautious protest in I can no harm of no warm Deviani, line 500, and his ironic insistence in lines 441 to 48 on the truth of his story, lines 445 to 46, and comparing it with the women's favorite book of Launcelot de Lake, do all in a critical attitude to chivalry and romance. The widow is the Onavai human character in the story, who is described at any length, see lines 55 to 80. Her simple life is illustrated in her slender meals, lines 67 to 80. The implicit contrast with the prioress is seen better if affectation and courtly manners of the prioress described in the general prologue are compared with the simple life of the widow. She is idealized and allegorical, but realistically particularized. Consider lines 63 to 66. The number of the daughters, the source, the kine and the sheep, the tide malty, is sufficient concreteness of detail. Check your progress. 3. 1. Chaucer is at once a pilgrim, an innocent reporter, a narrator, and the author of CT. How do you relate these aspects of his art? 2. In what sense the human characters of the tale are in the background? 3. Attempt a character sketch of the priest. 6.6. The ironic structure, sympathy and detachment. The English word irony is derived from the Greek word evonia, which means simulated ignorance. Simulation is acting, pretending or feigning. Irony is thus dramatic. Secondly, the ironic use of language has an inner meaning for the privileged and an outer for the rest. Dramatic irony is more than merely verbal. It has to do with situation or event. The classical Greek myth of Oedipus is an example of tragic irony. Moreover, according to classical Indian poetics, the best kind of poetry does not state but suggests meaning. The ironic structure of NPT is prominent in the play of wit at the core of the story. The fox and the cock out with each other by turns. Consider lines 639 to 48, which show how the cock saves himself FKOM a tragic end by befooling the fox. The fox had flattered, hoodwinked and trapped him. His CJ trick would not have worked if the fox had seen his hidden meaning. Discretion and politeness, characteristic of the priest, require that his criticism of the prioress, his immediate target, and of women in general, should be indirect or ironical. He could not afford to offend his employer. Hence the boldness of the Ionist is the most remarkable aspect of his character as a person artist. The subtle self-expression of the narrator at once identifies him with and detaches him from his creator, the author. In this context, the priest's ironic reflection, lines 491 to 500, is more revelatory than Chanticleer's ironical mistranslation of a Latin text, lines 391 to 400. When we consider the narrative structure of the tale, we notice that digressias are MORAINTARASTING then THA central story. The dream, THA discussion, ABOUT it, and the J character of Partolot are all introduced for the purpose, among other THHGSDF dramatizing and reflecting on the age-old war of the sexes. There is no doubt that without this digression the story would have lacked its life and color, but the superimposition is undeniable. And that impregnates the form of the story with the spirit of the poet. Partolot hates Chanticleer for losing heart in fear, see lines 142 to 46. She asserts on behalf of all women the medieval ideal of chivalry and romance, lines 14751. The brave knight and the sweet courtier is the hero, but the cock is only sweet and witty, not brave. In the debate on dreams, however, she stands for reason and he for vision. Do they allegories the opposition of cold calculation and rash impulse? The widow, not the wife's the anti-feminist norm. The Christian moral outlook is pitted against the romantic. The tension of the two reflects the force of social change breaking through the poet's conservative temper. The priest confabulates in the following. My tale is of a cock, as ye may hear, that took his conceal of his wife with sorway, to walk in the yard upon that more rayway that he had amid the dream that I told. You will notice that the reflectory passage on evil and predetermination is felt by the self-conscious priest to be incongruous. Secondly, the cock followed his own free will, not the advice of his wife. The priest is confused, or at least confusing the audience. A close consideration of the text, particularly lines 486 to 89, and the reflective passages preceding and following these lines, enacts it clear. Tailothi's comic irony does not spare the narrator. Check your progress for 1. What is irony? How is it different from antithesis and ambiguity? 2. How are irony and wit related? Is irony necessarily devoid of sympathy? Discuss with examples. 3. Find 2 examples of verbal irony in the text. 4. Discuss the ironic structure of NPT. 5. Show that the priest's irony is directed against women. 6. How does Chaucer present the priest ironically? L. 6.7 The complex formal design, sermon, fable, mock heroic, comic, ironic. The aspects of the complex form as given above are: A. Sermon. B. Reflection. C. Mock heroic. D. Comedy. A. The dream. The dream stories and the debate on dreams. 0. The themes. G. The tale. Sermon is a storyteller is a priest. The story is aptly a sermon. The moral of the sermon is given at the end of the story. It is dramatic rather than didactic or hortatory. There are 3 morals drawn respectively by the cock, the fox and the Clysa priest. The cock's experience, which had verged on the tragic, had by a lucky flash of intelligence turned comic. And his moral is, one should keep one's eye open. The fox loses the game and is served right. He sounds a wiseacre in his moral. The priest's moral is given in 3.5 couplets. The first couplet points to the story. Notice such. The priest gives his evaluation of the cock's character in 3 epithets. In the second couplet, he turns to his audience. If they hold the tale or folly, they are requested to take the moral gist and ignore the narrative. B. In the next 3 lines, he appeals to the authority of St. Paul. His view of text is still valid. A text is a code to be decoded by the reader audience. The priest ends his tale with a prayer. The tale is an exemplum or example illustrating the moral. The defense of poetry has traditionally been that it is both entertainment and edification. The funny tale has a moral or many moral lessons as a sort of talepiece. Compare the relation between the tale and the moral of NPT with that of Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. Reflection. The description of the human setting of the fable is reflective or normative. The widow and her way of life is approved. The cock's reflection on murder goads justice lines 284 to 91 is conventional, but his reflection on woman lines 397 to 400 is much more characteristic and highly ironical. The priest's reflections on a truth in a story, see lines 439 to 448, b. Free will and predetermination 468 to 84, c. Women's counsel 491 to 500, d. Flattery 559 to 64, a. Destiny line 572, and f. Rhetoric and Geoffrey Winsoff 58188 are all functional. They are meant to help the audience interpret and evaluate the action. Mock heroic NPT is primarily a fable, and a fable is intrinsically mock heroic, for it assumes an identity or parallelism between animals and humans. Moreover, the tale reflects the poet's serio-comic outlook in the use of hyperbole and disproportion. Chanticleer, the mocker or hero, is presented in lines 84 to 98, which describe his voice and appearance. The comic exaggeration and the conventional humanization are remarkable. The priest explains, tongue-in-cheek. For thilke time, as I have in the stone they beasts and breed they speak and Sanji. Bertolot's ideal cock is women's ideal man. The cock's dream stories have not only human characters but learned sources in Cicero and Macrobius. His learned allusions to Christian and classical law are of course mock heroic. The royal cock looketh as it were grimly on line 413. The fall of this prince of a cock is averted by a happy stroke of luck. The cry that the waffle hen is made is mock heroically described as greater than the cries described in heroic epics like Homer's Iliad and Virgil's Aeneid. Patalot shrieked louder than did her true eyes wyf. The hens cried like the senator's wife when Nero burnt Rome. The epic analogies are unmistakably mock heroic. The priest's reflections on Adam and Eve, on free evil and predetermination, are all mock heroic, for the occasion is light or comic. The tale is unique in the tradition of mock heroic poetry in English. Dryden and Pope wrote, respectively, Macflack No More and The Rape of the Log. But unlike these poems, NPT deals with low animals. Nor is it allegorical satire like Animal Farm. It mocks heroism as Don Quixote mocks heroism, romance and chivalry. Chaucer's realism is the forerunner of Cervantes and Shakespeare's 100 comedy. CBRNEDY, comedy is the essential aspect of the forms of the tale. It is not mere sugarcoating for the sermon. The pure fun and humor of the fable is the superficial comic element. Secondly, the union of the elite appeal of the rhetorical and philosophical amplifications with the folktale brings out the comic incongruity between high and low poetic styles. Chaucer manipulates the styles to create serio-comic effects. Moreover, parody, burlesque and farce are used. A comparison of the first 10 couplets of the tale, lines 61 to 80, with the following 16.5 lines 8-1-1-1-3 shows how realism and the plain style are mixed with the romantic and the rhetorical. The ironical angle of the artist transforms the priest's homily into poetry. The moral stance becomes inseparable from the aesthetic. The cock story, in which character is more important than incidents, is interpreted by the priest, and the poet judges or interprets this interpretation in the wider context of the whole poem. Poetry, we know, is the criticism of life. A close consideration of the comedy of the cock's life is pride, his pedantry, and here two temptations, A. Woman and B. Yielding to flattery shows that the main plot requires only the last trait, i.e. yielding to flattery, and the other traits BP. 2. The subplot in which the dream and the hen figure prominently. The two plots 1. The cock and the fox plot in 2. The cock, the dream and the hen plot, of course linked, but the link is not causal or rational. The comedy of the plots lies A. in the mingling of satire with sympathy and B. in the play of wit. The primary plot is realistic and ironical, and the secondary plot romantic and symbolical. The character of R greater than SEOCLC determines the incidents, but the character of the priest is no less remarkable. Notice how the poet transmutes his reflection and makes it reflection himself rather than pure reason. What the priest asserts in the lines 486 to 500 in general and in particular is confused and confusing. In the last couplet, he imputes his words and views to the loci listening. The seer had refuted his wife's argument about dreams, but forgot to heed the warning of his dream. The other unexpected turn of events turns the tale into a happy comedy corresponding to the serio-comic art and vision of the poet. The dream stories, and the debate obnurates. The dream fiction is like dream or daydream. The use of dream in fiction is, therefore, doubly insubstantial. In Middle English poetry, the dream is used as a poetic technique and suggests vision or imagination. Langland, Speed's Ploughman or Chaucer's own. The House of Fame, the Parliament of Fowls and Troilus and Cressida use the device of dreams. Dreams have always exercised the human mind. The medieval interpretations were allegorical or analogical. The psychoanalytic interpretation of Freud and Jung have revolutionized modern thought. The view of the human mind is now radically different because of the recognition of the role and importance of the unconscious in human life and activity. Think of the waking dream, ambition or fantasy of people. Chaucer added the dream of Chanticleer to the traditional story. The conflicting interpretations by the hen and the cock are highly dramatic. More than one-third of the tale is occupied by this digression or secondary plot. The dream is presented in lines 116 to 140. The cock had dreamt of a frightening beast. It was Lyk and hound, and Waldhammer arrest upon illy body, and ha had me deed. In other words, the hound-like beast would have seized and killed him. And so, even after waking, yet of his look for fairy almost I die. This fear had made him groan and frightened Patalot. Chanticleer interprets his night as warning against a possible danger of death. The warning prepares him only partially for the event, and he is able to save himself in crisis, for he keeps his wit about him. If he had not dreamt of the event, he could. Quando medieval poet I Chaucer not have managed the crisis so well as he does. The dream is thus an integral part of the plot and not a mere digression. Dream stories. Patalot dismisses dreams as meaningless. She takes the scientific but unimaginative stand that they are caused by a physical disorder. She prescribes laxatives and herbs as a remedy for bad dreams. She does not tell any stories. But Chanticleer tells many stories to prove the truth of his view that dreams are significant. They provide a vision of the future. Prophecy, vision, imagination are human faculties which may be described as waking dreams. Arts including the art of poetry and the narrative art are the collective dream of mankind. They attempt to connect the ideal and the sensory aspects of experience. Stories are like dreams. Both reflect experience. Chanticleer is a dreamer and storyteller. But allowed pragmatism yield no room to such functions or a behavior. Chanticleer's first story is 501, one of the greatest octets that men read. This unnamed author is Cicero. Chaucer's use of learning is remarkably more dramatic than any other English poets except Shakespeare's. The story is of two pilgrims who had to part company and put up for the night in separate lodgings. One of them dreamt about the other that he was in danger of death. The dream was repeated, but he did not take it seriously, but he could not ignore the third dream. In the first two dreams, the fellow pilgrim seemed to be making an appeal for help. Now help me, dear brother, or I die. In the third dream, the spirit of the fellow pilgrim reports that he is slain. My gold cost my murder. The second theme of the story is murder wol out. A sort of moral drawn, but the relevant moral is that dreams should not be dismissed as empty and irrelevant. The second story is about two persons who were to sail to some destination. One of them dreamt the voyage should be postponed and he advised the other fellow to do so. But the other said, I said not a straw bites I dreamt. For Swavin's been but 2 nights and jeeps, as expected, the one who sailed was drowned. The moral is, no man should be too reckless of dreams and some dreams are to be dreaded. This second story, also from Cicero in the same book I read right in the next Peter after this, is shorter. The Old Testament, Homer's Iliad and Macrobius, a medieval writer who interpreted and classified dreams, are the other sources for the reference to some dreams famous in literature. Chaucer rummaged through Christian and classical literature to find a definite interpretation of dreams which interested him. Langland was more visionary and his Piers Plowman is in the form of a dream. Realism was Chaucer's forte, which makes him the father of modern poetry. The debate on dreams. This debate serves two artistic purposes. It presents a. the contemporary theories on the subject and b. the characters of the cock and the hen, man and wife. The scientific point of view is contrasted with the superstitious or popular point of view. Both seem to be a half-true, and Chaucer perhaps never made up his mind on the topic. However, the debate gives the presentation of the theories a human and dramatic context. This is distinctively poetic and contrasts with the abstract manner of philosophy. Let us briefly notice the tonal effect. The hen states her attitude to the cock who has been frightened by his dream, 141,156. Then she presents her view of the origin and cause of dreams. And finally she prescribes the remedy. But the cock is much more elaborate and pedantic in his presentation. He uses stories, anecdotes, learned differences in support of his point of view. He appears to be a self-centered pedant, but he is also the sufferer. She seems to have little sympathy for him, but she is practical and tells what she regards the necessary steps to help him. Chaucer manipulated the characters in his slow comic view. The self-pity of the cock is matched by what ironically looks like the heartless attitude of the hen. And the cock too is made to transcend self-pity by the end. He who flatters the hen acts the loving husband and seems to forget his fear of the impending danger of which the dream was a premonition. After all, destiny works through character, necessity being conditional, not absolute in such cases. Themes. Some major themes of the tale are the following. 1. The simple life and the plain reality. The Christian or religious attitude to poverty and wealth or octi. Poverty has moral approval, wealth is regarded as sinful. 2. The medico-science plus IIC view of dreams contrasted with 11 the popular superstitious view. 3. Reflection on murder or homicide. 4. Man-woman relationship. A. Woman is Ellen and joy da one his bliss. B. Woman's conceal brought us first to woe and made Adam pro paradise to go. 5. Free will and predetermination. Simple necessity and necessite conditionia. 6. Reflection on flattery and the role of courtier. 7. Rhetoric Geoffrey Devins of his theory. 8. Destiny inescapable fortune sudden turns. 9. A. Morals drawn keep your eyes open and mouth shut. B. Take up the fright and let the chaff be still. The tale. The first 2/3 of the tale present an idyllic and romantic atmosphere. It is like paradise before it was lost. The pace of the story is leisurely. The characters are introduced first the widow who led a simple life, then the cock, Chanticleer, the protagonist, and his hens. Of which the fairest hewed on her throat was cleft fair damois culpert a lot. They are man KD wife. The cock loved her very much. 1-4% voice is murrier than the music organ of the church. Then the dream is presented and the debate on dreams follows. Chaucer shifted the focus of interest from Chanticleer's fig to Chanticleer's dream. Incident and character are integrated. Shell poet. What is character but the determination of incident? What is incident but the CLT or illustration of character? Said Henry James. The debate on dreams illustrates the characters of the cock and the hen. The villain, the colfox, enters the scene in the last third of the story. Then the movement becomes rapid. There is more of action in this part, non-verbal action. Speeches or dialogues are brief. The narrator exclaims and reflects after introducing the villain. He manipulates the pace. Consider lines 460 to 80 and beyond. He reflects on women conceal, womanines conceal brought us first to woe and made Adam pro paradise to go. But he shifts the ground. For I know to whom it might displease if I conceal of woman world blame pass over, for I said it in my game. The priest is agitated and confused. He reveals his feeling against women through the cock's words and disclaims them. I can none hide me of no woman divinity. This sudden turn given to the story is highly interesting. Chanticleer has deliberately mistranslated the Latin sentence earlier. He is presented as the courtly and chivalrous flatterer of women. The priest is satirically outspoken. The two male views of women, chivalrous and satirical or cynical 7, are presented. This theme, i.e. the male view of women, is superimposed upon the plot. BPTH. The debate on dreams and the expression of misogynist feeling are digressias skillfully woven into the story. The latter digression is the intrusion of the subjective feeling of the narrator into the story. Here, the narrator is not differentiated from the author. One critic pointed to the deeper simplicity of Chaucer, which reflects faithfully the paradoxes of personality, the contradictions of experience. The action is both mental and material and social. Chanticleer was Oithe's fox that lay full low as he cast his eye on a butterfly. The fox flatters and cheats the frightened cock into singing with his eyes shut and seizes him by the throat. The lamentation of the hens is followed by the chase of the fox. The chase is lively. The transitions from the human to the animal, from the serious to the light dollar, from the high style to the low are remarkably artistic in the tale. The narrator reminds the audience at various points, lines 115,419, 486 and 673, that the tale is of a cock etc. He describes the animal behavior at many points, refer to lines 195-201,411-418, and HERNOS from the lower realistic style to the romantic or rhetorical at many points. The low style of lines 55 to 80 is followed by the high style of lines 81, 115. The serial is theme of lines 471 to 484 is interrupted by the reminder, line 486, that the tale is merely of a cock, and again the serious reflection on woman's counsel and the loss of paradise is taken up. The play of wit with the crisis and turns the plot from a tragic into a comic one. Morals are drawn by both the cock and the fox. The priest draws his moral and turns to his audience. The author addressed readers, contemporary and future readers. NPT is an artifact, an important item in the English literary tradition. It has survived all the social and cultural changes since Chaucer. It has something of a universal appeal. Its poetry has an eternal freshness. Check your progress. 5. 1. Describes the complexity of the form of NPT. Use 20 sentences. 2. Write a note on the mock heroic aspect of the tale. 10 sentences. 3. Do you think the theme of man-woman relationship is irrelevant to the tale? 4. Briefly discuss the function of dreams in life, referring to the interpretations of dreams by Freud and Jung. 5. Write a note on Chaucer's interpretation of dreams. Do you think Chanticleer expresses the poet's point of view? 6. Do you think the use of the dream in the tale in a digression? 7. Write a note on the use of learning and narrator in the debate on dreams. 8. Bring out the dramatic aspect of the debate on dreams. 9. Attempt a critical appreciation of the narrative art of the Chaucer with reference to NPT. 10. How is the theme of necessity conditional illustrated in the tale? 11. How are plot and character related in the tale? 12. What, if anything, is shared by the three storytellers in the tale, i.e. the cock, the priest and the poet? 13. Write a note on the comedy of the tale. Is it a merry tale? The host wanted a story, as may or a taste glad. As a reader of the tale, do you find your heart gladdened? How? 6.8 Summing up. This unit prepares us for critical study of the text of NPT given as Appendix I in Unit 2. There we shall also have the translation of the text, notes and glossary. Both the units are intended to be studied together. You will notice that your first reading of the text has to be supported with the critical guidance provided in these units. An introduction to Chaucer and his age together with a detailed study of the general prologue to the Canterbury Tales is provided in other units. You are expected to be familiar with them as well for a better appreciation of Chaucer's poetry.